I've often wondered what native habitat I would be surrounded by if it wasn't for all the buildings and roads. Here in California's Central Valley, it would be uninterrupted grasslands. After a bit of research, I learned that California's grassland habitat has been mostly lost due to urban and agricultural development, with the plant cover comprising of 90% non-native plant species. This plant cover provides homes for 90% of state-listed endangered species, but still, this is a tremendous diversity hotspot. As an artist, I've been incredibly inspired by the local grasslands. Visually, they're very minimal, but biologically, they're very complex. As I contemplated these ideas, I decided to start a series of sculptures. I started by drawing and cutting out abstract organic shapes from medium density fiberboard, also known as MDF. Once cut out, I sanded the edges smooth. I then used some masking tape and carefully masked out the edges of my shape, which, if you haven't guessed by now, is supposed to represent a landform, which will hopefully be the base of some miniature hills. Now that the base has been prepared, I can start to build up the terrain. Using crumpled up paper, masking tape, and even aluminum foil, I designed the terrain of the hills. As a young artist, I would always draw and paint landscapes, so this process was basically a 3D version of that I really enjoyed. I was also a big fan of the terrain editor in Zoo Tycoon. I used the world's squeakiest hot glue gun to add some structure to the terrain and attach it securely to the base. Normally I use gesso for preparing canvases, but I figured it would work the same way on these sculptures, adding some tooth and a base layer. This is a material called Cellu clay. It's actually just instant paper mache. I add in a few scoops, followed by some water. I just eyeball it, and then I mix it up. This is what it looks like once it's mixed. Kind of like rice pudding or cottage cheese. And then I just use my finger and I fill in any parts of the landscape that have voids and smooth out the top layer. This is the part of the process where the landscape really starts to come alive. You can start to see what it's going to look like in the end. And you can almost imagine it as a landscape. Once I get it to a place where I feel like it's finished, I stick it in the sun and let it dry. It's a day later and it's time to add some color to the sculptures. I'm using a burnt umber acrylic brown and a white acrylic gouache. Really, any brown color will do because this is just an undercoat for the next step. No one will really see this brown paint. To really add some detail to these sculptures, I'm introducing some real dirt. And this is just dirt from my backyard, which I initially sifted very fine and then added to the topper of a spray paint can. I really only want the finest particles to pour out, so I'm adding a nylon and rubber band to the top. This is Mod Podge. It's a type of glue, and it's what I'm going to be using to get the dirt to stick onto these landscapes. I brush on the Mod Podge and then sprinkle the dirt on top. Following the dirt is static grass. I'm going to be using an applicator that introduces a static charge to the grass, and this helps it to glue down standing straight up, just as it would if it was growing out of the ground. I've also switched to rubber gloves because I don't want to be shocked, and that's what Ash Ketchum wore when he didn't want to be shocked by Pikachu. After adding my Mod Podge, I attach one side of the cable to the sculpture and then sprinkle on the static grass. I work little by little, adding in patches of grass, but I also make sure to leave some dirt patches too. As I repeat the process, I make sure I knock off any excess static grass. And now it's finally starting to look like an actual miniature grassland. The last step, though, is to carefully peel off the masking tape that was around the base. And here is the final hill. Now, if you've ever been to the Central Valley, you might be wondering, why aren't these hills yellow? Because in general, especially during the summertime, they are yellow. But the hills used to be green year round due to a native bunch grass that has now been outcompeted. This is the most recent hill that I've made, and I started to experiment with making them in two parts, kind of inspired by islands. Although not a direct inspiration, I found that the grasslands are quite island like. They're divided by fences and roads, and they create all of these shapes that make it hard for someone trying to experience them to experience them. I've been lucky enough to have my local art gallery show interest in these sculptures, and they're actually on exhibit with some of my black and white photography. These sculptures might be simple, minimal, and organic, but I hope that their miniature forms can draw a viewer in and ask them to question what it means to be among the grasslands.